Welcome, dear readers of Oahspe, Faithists, and other New Age Universal Path seekers. This video is intended to reveal the difficulties a certain Dr. Bowman had faced as one of the founding members of the colony of Shalam under the direction of Dr. John Newbrough. He is an example of the vast majority of the original pioneers who, at one time or another, decided to quit the colony because of the difficult conditions they faced at the colony. I will not give more of an introduction than that. I'll simply read his letter to the editor, and it was originally sent to the Rio Grande Republican, and it was republished in La Cruce's Sun News. Okay, here we go. Dr. Bowman's charges. Las Cruces Sun News, 13th of June, 1885. Having, in a recent column of your paper, vindicated the character of some good people I know in the Shalam colony, it is now my important duty to turn the other side of the picture to the public. In doing this, my first plan was to give in historic detail my sad experiences with that movement. But I soon found that I would have to write too long an article. So I will make my bill of indictment brief and to the point. It is not a personal matter with me, nor my family, as much as we have suffered. But many others are interned in this colony, and if left unwarned, might be brought into the same troubles from which some of us are with difficulty escaping. Dr. Newbrough was trusted as a good and true man, but has turned out to be a bad and false man. The great and noble enterprise which has attracted so many people towards it has turned out, in the hands of its leader, to be a miserable fraud and failure, with but intrigue and corruption at the bottom of it. As hard a sentence as it is to utter against my fellow man trusted in matters of high and sacred interest, I am compelled to say it in the interest of truth and to warn others that Dr. Newbrough's course in this whole Shalam movement has proved itself to be a course of hypocrisy, concealment, duplicity, falsehood, despotism, cruelty, and crime. He is guilty of hypocrisy in taking vows and requiring others to take vows, to practice a certain course of life in reference to diet and general deportment, and then gets out of sight and live in utter disregard of those vows and principles. He is guilty of concealment and hypocrisy in letting both the public and his own followers to believe that the Shalam colony owns the land it's living on, when he very well knows that the colony does not own a foot of land and cannot bring without a charter, having no legal existence, and that a man in Boston who furnishes the money owns the land. He is guilty of hypocrisy in having made the pretense of receiving vast sums of money in mysterious ways and from unknown sources to forward his supremacy, that he might impress the superstitious with reverence for his authority. He is guilty of duplicity and falsehood in misrepresenting to strangers the nature of his movement and advising his followers to conceal the character and objects of the colony from the people of this country, under the guise that the inhabitants here are a set of heathen Uzians, as they are called in his book. He is guilty of despotism throughout his career by thus enterprising to have himself appointed chief under the sanction of pretended revelations from heaven. and then announcing to his followers that his authority was absolute and infallible, and that the rest of the colony had no voice in its management, but were only guests of his. That it was impossible for a person appointed by him for any service to make a mistake. That his authority from heaven was to be absolute until after 12 full members should be received by him, he having the power to keep the same disbelieving 12 as long as he chose. That no one had a right to ask any questions or seek any explanation as to what was done by him and his inner council. He is guilty of despotism and cruelty in attempting to suppress correspondence between his followers and the friends and relatives they had left behind them, expressing his suspicions that some of the discontented members of the colony might blow us up, to use his own language, forgetting perhaps that it is only the guilty tyrant that has apprehensions of being blown up. He is guilty of cruelty and despotism of the most heartless and cruel character in ordering a young girl to come into his presence under suspicion of being dissatisfied in the community. And when she told him the truth, that she had come here because her father and sisters came, he ordered her to pack her trunk and start back to New York the next day. And this he did when that girl's sister was on what we call her deathbed, half the time delirious with a fever that was burning out her life. And when that girl came to her father in deep distress and tears at the decree of the tyrant, and her father told her she should not go away till he and her sisters together went with her. The tyrant heard of it and came rushing into the tent where the father was with his sick child, and demanded, "Who gave you the authority to say that my decree shall not be fulfilled in sending people away from here? I will let you know that there is a master here." He is guilty of heartless cruelty in allowing that sick child to lie with her burning fever a whole week without medical attention or any other attention, and having at last to be begged for 2 days before he would do anything for her at all, and then only gave some medicine for her, but refused to visit her. All this when he knew, and everyone knew, that that sick child, in her devotion to the colony and under the influence of himself and others, had left her own sick mother on a sick bed in New York, made sick by Newbrough's despotism, to come with the first pioneers to live in a tent and do the drudgery for him. And the baby and its mother, this very hardship, doubtlessly bringing on her sickness. And it was this act of cruelty and despotism that sent me and my children out on the plains of New Mexico, with no remittances but the blue sky and the stars of heaven, to seek shelter and food without money and without friends. But, thank heaven, as Jehovah is not limited to the precincts of Camp Shalam, as believed among the doctor's superstitious devotees, I found in the breasts of strangers in this far-off land, in sympathy and brotherhood, that have no existence in the boasted Jehovah's kingdom on earth, except in a few individual hearts there. As if this were not enough, Newbrough still pursued his routine of cruelty and villainy towards me and my children, melding crime to cruelty. He taunted us with our destitute condition, lied on me by reporting that I was borrowing money from everybody in Las Cruces, and perpetrating the unworthiness of myself to be the father, speaking even to my little child disrespectfully of their father, and trying to seduce them to come back to him. To all this he adds the crime of appropriating my furniture while my children slept on the floor at La Cruces. A further crime of taking the private locked trunks of my wife and daughters from Donna Anna against my orders to Mr. Wertheim, who had them in charge, and breaking them open, plundering them, and letting them lie out of doors exposed for several days before returning them. And last of all, in this connection, he has the vile dishonesty to keep back from my wife her tableware and tried to cover the meanness of the act by fabricating a bill of board and railroad against me and my children, as if we were boarders instead of faithful and lavish workers and contributors in that colony while there. It must be a pleasant thought to the Shalamites that while they are working like slaves, there is a secret board bill being kept against them to be presented if they find they cannot remain there. Now, Mr. Editor, this is not all nor the worse by a good deal, but this letter is long enough, and the balance is of a nature that belongs rather to the court of justice than to the newspapers. At any rate, I withhold it for the present,